Nier Automata is a very good game. I utterly adored my time with it. The first Nier was already one of my favourite games, and the sequel executed on the series' formula brilliantly. It perfectly matched my gaming sensibilities. Automata is definitely one of the best games I have ever played. So then, how do I rate this game? I'm not a fan of point scores for things as a way of marking quality, due in large part to the inherent subjectivity of those reviews. It seems far more sensible to me to put your thoughts out there and then let the audience judge them. There's also the differing opinions on what a 10 out of 10 score actually means in the sense of both a piece of consumable media and as a piece of art. However, despite all that, the number is useful as a ballpark, an efficient descriptor of quality, rather than me resorting to gushing about this new Nier game for like 30 minutes. It's the scoring system we've got, for better or worse. With all that in mind, if I had to give Nier Automata a point score, I would immediately go with a 10 out of 10. And that doesn't mean I think it's perfect. Let me explain. There are two key opinions when it comes to the concept of a 10 out of 10 score. The first is the systematic side of the argument. This side is representative of modern art, a formal, passive approach to art consumption. For ease, let's refer to this as the methodical approach. A 10 out of 10 in mathematical terms is 100% a perfect score. That's the key part, perfect. Following this reasoning, a 10 out of 10 game is one without flaw, a work of such perfection that literally nothing could surpass it. This is also impossible. No work can be truly perfect in this sense. And so, by this reasoning, giving out a 10 out of 10 score to something is always objectively incorrect. This approach also tends to put greater weight on technical flaws, as opposed to whether these flaws actually serve to hinder the core experience. With that explained, let's talk about the other side of the 10 out of 10 scoring argument. This side is the emotive approach, and reflects the postmodern form of art critique. A postmodern critique looks at art as a dialogue, fully open to interactions and diverse interpretations. To understand this side, you really need to come at the problem from a different angle. Rather than thinking of whether a game is perfect, try thinking in terms of how well a game achieves its goals. On these terms, a 10 out of 10 score represents a game which perfectly, there's that word, achieves everything it sets out to do, a game which is truly cohesive as a piece of work. This does a really interesting thing when you get to discussing art. By shifting the focus away from are there flaws to do these flaws hinder the experience, we actually come into some far more nuanced discussion. This is probably getting a little abstract, so let me use an example for this. I don't think many would refute that Breath of the Wild is a great game. It encourages exploration of a vast world like few games achieve, and features a map far richer in character, variety, and iconic sights than most. This is where the game excels, and I adore the systems in place to support this style of gameplay, from the excess number of Korok seeds to the albeit divisive weapon break mechanic. In its open-air exploration is where Breath of the Wild shines. However, when you look at the game as a whole, and once you've spent a good chunk of time with it, the flaws begin to show themselves. Everything to do with the main plot is pretty poorly realised. The main characters are shallow, and the Divine Beast dungeons, while impressive spectacles, ultimately clash with the style of the rest of the game. The bosses in particular are sorely lacking when compared to the Zelda bosses of the past. The combat system is also really weird in the balance department once you get past the novelty of numerous approaches to combat. And then we get into the little things. The things that on their own don't really matter, but their annoyance certainly adds up. This includes things like the repetitive shrine entrance and exit sequences and their load times, to the inability to switch chest weapons without having to leave the chest prompt, drop the weapon you want to switch, then reopen the chest. These niggles do definitely get in the way of the game's ambitions, so while Breath of the Wild's gameplay heights are awfully high, the flaws definitely do their best to mess with the goals set out by the creators. So, looking back on our scoring system, the methodical approach would note the best and worst parts of Breath of the Wild. The existence of issues is taken at face value, with technical issues like low frame rate being particularly notable. From a consumer standpoint, this is valuable information. It does represent the quality of the game, but this method doesn't really work so well for a less conventional game, or one doing any particularly thoughtful stuff. The emotive approach would work in a similar way, but it isn't quite so cut and dry. This approach would look at how well Breath of the Wild succeeds at being a cohesive open-air adventure as the developers intended. In Breath of the Wild's case, the distinction isn't so different in terms of final score, but it does reframe the question in a sense. This method of scoring shifts the focus away from quality of nebulous content to quality of experience. This is a scoring approach where something as basic and amazing as Super Hexagon can compete alongside the likes of emotionally driven experiences like Life is Strange without it being a mathematical competition. If I had to give lofty words to describe the best games as seen through the lens of this emotive method, they would be cohesive, pure, and focused. These are games where every aspect of their design serves a unified goal, and if you think about what games are considered the peak of our medium, the games that are truly something special, the finest works of art, they reflect this. But along the same lines, with this approach, as we go down the rabbit hole of quality of experience over quality of game, it becomes less and less appropriate to distinguish between numeric scores. Great art is defined as much by where it falls short as where it excels, and so the existence of flaws doesn't necessarily hinder the clarity of an experience. And that's ultimately what the emotive method of scoring, this postmodernist approach, seeks to do, to score the experience beyond the product. And when you're talking about games in the way I, and many others, do, this approach becomes increasingly valuable. Anyway, with that ramble out of the way, let me give my brief thoughts on Nier Automata and why it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I can't talk about the strengths of Automata without getting into the story. The narrative here is fascinating, powerful, and emotionally resonant in a way few manage. Along the lines of the first game, it's a wild ride from start to finish. I adore meta stuff in games, and the Nier series makes use of the medium in this way the best I've ever seen. The Nier games are experiences that could only be realized as games. What's particularly notable is that you can feel how well-read Yoko Taro and the team are, with a great deal of philosophical thought, particularly existentialism, present throughout in meaningful ways. I'm trying my best to avoid any sort of spoilers, so I'm keeping things brief, but everything to do with the story is poignant and thoughtful. The conclusion to the game is a powerfully affecting thing, an extraordinary experience uniquely expressible through this medium. I lost sleep the night I finished Automata because my mind was too busy reflecting upon everything. I really cannot overstate how every single aspect of the story stuff in this game won me over. The first Nier had two areas where it didn't quite match the quality of the rest of the game: the average combat and the tedium of the side quests. Nier Automata thoroughly swept these weaknesses away for the sequel. Platinum Games are absolutely masterful at character action combat. The combat in Automata is a joy, with a diverse combo system, delightfully flashy audio-visual action, as well as the interesting chip and pod systems for diversifying your abilities. The fluid shifting of genres is also a real treat. The game's side quests grow in importance with the benefit of hindsight, working as tiny thematic tales running alongside the main plotline. They flesh out the world and offer hidden insights into plot points that come into play far down the line. The actual action of these side quests is also far less grindy and annoying, in part due to the excellent UI design. Overall, the visual design in Automata is terrific, and even something as simple as 2B's divisive outfit has a lot of symbolic depth to it. The audio component of the game is also excellent. Somehow, incredibly, Automata's soundtrack reaches the glorious quality of the original Niers, even surpassing it. Something which is rather understated during gameplay is the way the music can shift alongside the action on screen as a result of its modular nature. This is something that games have been doing a lot more often lately, but it's just so well executed here, with alterations such as the absence of vocal track or drum track drastically shifting the tone across scenes. I could honestly talk on and on about tiny little details that ascend Automata as an experience, and rave about the themes and ideas expressed within, but I won't. Ultimately, Nier Automata is just a game that eclipses most other media for me. Automata tells its tale and imparts its themes in a way games are uniquely qualified to do. It does this consistently and in beguiling ways. I finished the game a long while back, but I still can't stop thinking about everything. It touched me in a very real way. As a package, it's so consistently enchanting, emotionally and intellectually resonant, and stylistically brilliant. And that's why I'd consider Nier Automata a 10 out of 10 game and a masterpiece. It's not perfect, and nothing can be, but it executes on its goals and deeply, profoundly reaches them. It's one of those monumental artistic achievements, and one I hope to see sitting among the classics 10 years down the line, alongside the other 10 out of 10s of our blossoming medium. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully that was an interesting listen. Anyways, have a wondrous day.